Hello, I'm Josh Rear, a marketing manager at e-commerce partners. Today, I'm here to talk to you about avoiding email blasting shame. What is email blasting shame? Potentially making a mistake in an email that is going out to thousands of your subscribers and customers. Over the years, we at e-commerce partners have learned a thing or two about how to make sure to send a near perfect email out to that giant list of subscribers. Email, in many ways, has become the face of e-commerce businesses to most of their loyal followers. Therefore, it is important to communicate with them properly in order to continue to mature a trusting relationship. Why quality assurance? Well, as I said, email is really one of the most important marketing channels and has become extremely dynamic and complex as a way to reach out to your customers. A mistake in an email can give off a negative impression of your brand, which might create anxiety for a customer in whether they should trust your business as a place to spend their money. And mistakes can happen because as we go through the process of creating an email, there are lots of people involved. We have our strategy team, our design team, our development team, an account manager, whether that's your marketing manager of your business or the person who's working for an agency, such as e-commerce partners, to manage your email marketing. And if you're using an agency, then you yourselves, the client, have your own input on an email. Each person has a variety of responsibilities not limited to helping put out this email, and therefore they may be focused on their particular tasks and not necessarily the big picture. That's why it's important for someone to step up and do the quality assurance to avoid the shame. So, a few important topics we'll discuss in today's email. First, CanSpam, the CanSpam Act, government compliance, making sure that our emails include a few key items. Cross-platform adaptation and responsive design, very important as email marketing and overall online marketing in general progresses. Coupon codes, a very large part of our marketing efforts. Subject lines and pre-headers, and we'll discuss a little bit more what those are. Images and text links, making sure they work. And finally, testing, testing, testing before you send. First, the CanSpam Act. This is an act developed by the government about a decade ago, and it's governed by the FTC. The point is to govern uh, emails that commercial businesses send. It outlines a number of pieces that are required by businesses in order to be compliant, and as email platforms have adopted to it, following the guidelines of the Act help you avoid ending up in the spam box. First, important to have a from and reply to email address that is relevant to your business. Uh, Next, of course, this may seem obvious, but it's very important to have an unsubscribe link somewhere in the email messages. Most businesses tend to put this in the footer. Following that, very, very important to have a physical email address, not only to tell your customers where you are located so they can reach you, but many email platforms have adopted these rules, and without having a physical email address, especially without having a physical email address as text versus putting it as an image, an HTML image, having it as HTML text will prevent you from ending up in spam boxes. Finally, obviously just always important to, if you're working with partners or other organizations, that might be sending on your behalf, know what they're sending, make sure they are compliant as well, because you risk being on the line for potential penalty if these rules are not followed. Cross-platform adaptation. So there are dozens of viewing platforms that an email can be read on. Just to name a few, we have multiple types of iPhones, depending on what software people are at, depending what screen size they have. There's the Gmail mobile app, which is both for iPhone and Android. You have Windows phones, and then you have traditional desktop, Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo, and many more. So it's important to take into account all of these when putting together an email. We generally specify for three sizes, desktop, tablet, and mobile. Today, over 50% of emails are being read on a mobile device, so it is important to have a responsive design and at the very least, a design that can be easily read on a smaller mobile device. Another important piece to keep in mind, not all email platforms support CSS. So it's important to test in a variety of platforms. And we'll talk about testing a little later in the presentation. Continuing on cross-platform adaptation, it's important to design your template with a certain pixel width so that it appears well on multiple devices. Generally for desktop, this size is 600, but mobile and tablets tend to be a bit smaller. And to compensate for this, it's important to uh, design responsively if you can. As you can see here, we you know always try to optimize for desktop, mobile, and tablet. And in the iPhone case here, you can see the header shrinks down, um, and part of the side banners, the borders go away to compensate for the fact that the screen is a bit smaller. So when you're doing this as well, if you can be responsive, that's always a best practice so that people have the optimal viewing experience. Next, moving on to the subject line and pre-header. It's important to make sure there are no spelling mistakes. I know this seems very obvious, but uh, being in the email business, we see this uh, often when we look at when we're sitting around comparing notes and emails and looking at what other businesses are doing. Another thing to keep in mind is the pre-header. This might be your alt text or it's a first line of text at the top of the email. This, in many email platforms, specifically this example is from Gmail, this shows up after the subject line. Tends to be a little bit faded out, but this is an important piece to getting someone to open your email, and so you want to make sure it appears correctly. And you also, you want to make sure that if you're using alt text, that you've used the appropriate alt text. It's not alt text from a different email that was left in a template if you're going to be using a template over and over again. Next, the QA checklist. We developed this after some time. We realized the pieces that need to be checked off in order for us to feel satisfactory before sending out an email. So what we do every time we send out an email is we go through these steps to make sure everything is correct. Are all the links working? Does the image match the product feature when you go to the website? Is it the correct product? Is the subject line and pre-header correct as we discussed before? Is the footer, is the footer CanSpam compliant? Litmus, we're going to get into it a bit later, but it's an email testing software. Does it appear correctly in multiple platforms? Are there tracking codes? This is very important for us as e-commerce managers. We want to make sure we're showing results on the work that we're doing. Is the product in stock? Are we sending it at the correct time if we're scheduling it? Does it work well on all platforms? And finally, if there's a coupon code, does it work? Does it work for the appropriate product? And if there's an expiration date, have we stated that clearly in the email? So generally, if we go through this checklist and we can achieve and make sure all these items are there, we'll feel comfortable with sending it out. Moving on to testing software. So I mentioned Litmus before. It's a software that we subscribe to. It helps us test our emails in multiple platforms. We can see a checklist here at left of the some of the different options. You see multiple iPhones listed, iPads, AOL Mail, in Internet Explorer, and the list goes on and on. And then we, a little bit zoomed in here on an iPhone look and also Outlook, a preview of both of those. So we see in both these cases it is appearing how it should appear in that platform. Um, it's an important way to test, but it's certainly not the be all and end all. I would recommend if you have it at your disposal, test it on your iPhone or Android phone, depending what you use. Test it on your desktop, and in addition to just your email, have an email address in Yahoo if you can, and see how it appears there or Outlook. Moving along, the content of the email, the image, the link, the text. We mentioned spelling before. It's important to make sure everything is spelled correctly, especially when your programmer, might be copying it over from uh, as an image or text on a Photoshop template into HTML. So we want to make sure everything's spelled correctly. We're using HTML and Google approved fonts that will work well in multiple browsers. We want to make sure the image is appearing in browsers, and if there's no image, then hopefully we have some alt text or something on the template, a call to action, if the person is using a browser that might not support images. Um, and finally, the links. If it's just one hero image, is that image linking to the correct landing page on the site? If we're featuring multiple products, is each product go where it should be going? Coupon codes. One of the final important pieces of the content. Uh, it's very important to have the coupon code as text. This way the person can copy and paste it. It's important also that it not be above an image, as text above an image in certain email platforms can create problems. Um, and it'll also save a bunch of headaches. You want to make sure it's active. Go to the site, check it. If it's based on a minimum purchase, test it out in the cart. And finally, make sure the customer or subscriber, when they're receiving the email, knows how long the coupon is good for, what the promotion is. This way, it'll avoid calls to your customer service department or emails, and keep customers happy. Finally, we get to scheduling an email. In this, sometimes people just send out emails, but in many cases, more and more, we're sending a lot of emails, whether it's weekly or daily, or some businesses even multiple times a day. We want to get them scheduled. We want to make sure it's going out at the appropriate time zone. If it's going to the correct segment of our list. So when you're scheduling it, double check all of these items. It's also a good idea to spread out the send time of your emails. Sometimes websites can only support a certain amount of traffic, so it's important to keep that in mind as well. Don't overload the website, and slow that down, which can then impact the effectiveness of the email message you're sending out. So I want to thank you for listening to me today. In the future, this is the first of a series. We're going to be doing content on acquisition techniques, segmentation ideas, best practices to go along with that, responsive templates, and more. Additionally, we have other white papers and case studies on our website, ecommercepartners.net/services/email marketing. I'm Josh Freer, Marketing Manager at eCommerce Partners, and thank you very much for your time today.